The Ray Murder. The series follows a police officer on vacation in Ray, Sweden. At the beginning of the series, we find ourselves at a party filled with young people. One of the teenagers there is Amanda. In the middle of the party, Amanda calls her father to pick her up. However, at that moment, he is relaxing in his car and doesn't answer the phone. Since she doesn't get a response, Amanda decides to head home on her own. As she is about to leave, Amanda receives a call from someone and steps outside. She has an electric bike with her, but since she's a bit intoxicated, she chooses to walk instead. Not long after, a car approaches. Amanda gets into the vehicle, and that is the last time she is seen. Somewhere else, a police officer named Hannah is on her way to the town of Ray, where Amanda lives. This town is a well-known tourist destination, famous for its resorts and ski spots. But Hannah isn't there for a vacation. Her brother owns a cabin in Ray, and she can stay there for a while. She comes alone. She just wants some time to herself after dealing with problems at work. The next morning, Amanda's mother, Lena, tries to wake her up, but Amanda isn't in her room. She then tells her husband, Harold, that Amanda didn't come home last night. Unfortunately, Harold has no idea where she is either. At the same time, a woman named Myra shows up. Turns out, she's the one who slept with Harold in his car the night before. Meanwhile, somewhere else, Myra's husband finds a phone left in his car. When he checks, it turns out to be Harold's. This means that while they were having an affair, Harold unknowingly left his phone in Myra's car. Myra starts to panic. She's afraid her husband will find out about the affair, so she wants to end things. But Harold, the jerk that he is, isn't ready to let go just yet. Of course, they can't talk about this in public. Time passes. The townspeople gather at the church for worship. However, Lena still can't reach Amanda and doesn't find her at the church either. Meanwhile, at Hannah's place, it turns out her brother has a car at the cabin, so Hannah decides to use it. Since she isn't familiar with the town's roads, she accidentally drives into a one-way street. As she tries to back up, a police car suddenly blocks her path. An officer named Daniel approaches and tells Hannah that this is a one-way street, so she needs to leave immediately. But since she isn't used to this car, she struggles to control it, making Daniel even more suspicious. Daniel then asks for Hannah's ID, but the problem is, she left it in her other car. His suspicion grows. To clear up the situation, Hannah finally reveals her real identity as a police officer. After confirming that she is indeed a cop, Daniel lets her go. Somewhere else, Harold goes to the party location where Amanda was last seen. There, he meets Amanda's friend, a teenager named Ebba. When Harold asks if Ebba knows where Amanda went after the party, she replies, maybe she wanted to meet Victor. Who's Victor? Harold asks. Ebba admits she doesn't know him well, but she once heard Amanda mention the name. With no other leads, Harold decides to head home. On his way back, he spots Daniel. It turns out Lena was so worried that she reported Amanda's disappearance to the police. She arrives with another officer named Anton. Harold tells them that Ebba saw Amanda leaving the party and that she might have gone to meet someone named Victor. However, neither Lena nor Harold recognizes the name, so they are sure Victor isn't Amanda's boyfriend. Harold also reveals that he lost his phone the night before though. Of course, he doesn't mention that it happened while he was cheating. Instead, he plays a voicemail from Amanda, asking to be picked up. Finding the situation suspicious, Daniel immediately dispatches a police team to start searching for Amanda. That night, while staying at her cabin, Hannah also hears about Amanda's search. A search team is being formed, and local volunteers are asked to help the next day. Since she doesn't have much else to do, Hannah decides to join them. The search team is led by a businessman named Bosse. They start combing through the snowy area, even poking into the snow in case Amanda is buried underneath. Although they don't find Amanda, they do find her electric bike. A local confirms that Amanda often used it to get to school. This discovery is a bad sign. The location where the bike was found isn't a usual path for bicycles. It seems like someone deliberately hid it there. At the same time, Hannah talks to one of the search team members, who turns out to be Amanda's friend. She describes Amanda as a nice girl, but with terrible taste in men. It turns out this woman is Victor's ex-girlfriend, the same Victor who was dating Amanda. She says that Victor is a terrible guy, especially when he's drunk. Night falls, and the search for Amanda is temporarily halted. Lena begs the police to continue searching, but they refuse, saying it's too dangerous. Once things calm down, Hannah meets with Daniel. She tells him about Victor, but Daniel and Anton already know about him from Harold earlier. Hannah has gathered a lot of information about Victor from his ex-girlfriend and shares the details with Daniel. After that, she also meets the police chief who is involved in Amanda's search. Hannah introduces herself as a police officer from Stockholm. She's currently on leave, but wants to be temporarily reassigned here to assist in the search for Amanda. Since the Bray police force is understaffed, Hannah is welcomed. She explains that in Stockholm, she works in the domestic violence division. Working in this field can be traumatic, especially for a woman like her, which is why she decided to take leave. After finishing her business, Hannah returns to the cabin, but she is surprised to find a strange woman there. The woman introduces herself as Zura, a cleaning staff member responsible for maintaining empty cabins. Hannah doesn't feel suspicious, so Zura quickly leaves. Somewhere else, Myra has just arrived home. Her husband, Frederick, is already waiting for her. Frederick knows that Amanda's disappearance will keep Harold from working for a few days. He asks Myra about her job, since she happens to be Harold's assistant. Myra doesn't want to talk about it, but Frederick seems to already know that she's having an affair with Harold. Meanwhile, at Amanda's house, it's not just Amanda who's missing. Her dog is also nowhere to be found. Amanda's younger sibling searches for it and eventually finds the dog dead. Elsewhere, Daniel and the police are working late into the night. They discover that Amanda's phone was last active at 2:14 a.m., while Victor's phone was also active nearby. Anton recognizes the area. There's an abandoned cabin there. Since Victor has a criminal record for violence against his ex-girlfriend, there's a possibility that he's holding Amanda captive in that cabin. Daniel immediately leads a police team to the location. When they enter the cabin, they find Victor with a woman, but that woman isn't Amanda. Elsewhere, a cable car operator starts his morning shift. As he rewinds the cable car, he discovers Amanda's frozen body on one of the seats. When the sun rises, the area officially becomes a crime scene. Hannah is informed about the discovery. However, since she's still new to the team, some officers remain wary of her and act defensively. They begin examining Amanda's body. Although it initially looks like she froze to death, there are bruises around her neck. Daniel also reveals that Victor isn't the culprit, as he has a solid alibi for the night Amanda disappeared. Elsewhere, Ebba has heard the news that Amanda's body has been found. She breaks down in tears and locks herself in the bathroom. She remembers the night of the party, when she drank too much and threw up. Amanda was the one who helped her. Ebba also recalls the moment when Amanda asked about her new bracelet. At the time, Amanda asked where she got it, but Ebba didn't want to answer and chose to walk away. Meanwhile, Hannah and Daniel go to Amanda's house to inform her family that her body has been found. They also search Amanda's room for clues. Hannah finds an envelope filled with cash. Daniel asks Harold about it, but Harold claims he knows nothing. At that moment, Harold also tells them about his dog's death. He suspects that it might be connected to Amanda's murder. Elsewhere, Anton goes to Amanda's school to inform her friends that she has passed away. Since Ebba was the host of the party that night, the police want to check the phones of everyone who attended. There might be clues stored on their devices about what really happened that night. Back to Hannah and Daniel. They go to the police station to meet with the coroner who examined Amanda's body. The coroner concludes that Amanda was likely strangled to death somewhere else before her body was moved to the cable car. Daniel starts feeling suspicious about the police chief who accepted Hannah. He thinks the chief made the decision too quickly. When Daniel questions him, the chief simply replies that they are short-staffed, so Hannah's help is needed. If Daniel doesn't like it, he can check Hannah's background himself. That night, Bosse, the businessman who previously led Amanda's search, throws a party at his house. The party is extravagant, as Bosse is a successful entrepreneur. His wife gives him a Rolex as a gift, but instead of being happy, Bosse scolds her because their financial situation is not good. The party was his wife's idea, and it looks expensive, even though they are actually struggling with money. His wife snaps back at him, revealing that the Rolex is fake. It's not easy having a socialite wife who loves flaunting wealth. Meanwhile, Hannah and Anton are going through Amanda's friends' phones. Since it's late at night, Anton decides to go home, but Hannah chooses to stay and work overtime. On one of the phones, she finds a recording of some teenagers playing. In the recording, they spot a car, but Hannah can only hear it. Realizing this could be an important clue, Hannah calls Daniel even though it's late. She informs him that a suspicious car was seen around the time Amanda was heading home from the party, but since it's already late, they agree to discuss it tomorrow. The next day, Anton watches the recording first. Someone recognizes one of the teenagers in the video, so they plan to question them. Not long after, Daniel calls Hannah for a conversation. Back in Stockholm, Hannah is under investigation for allegedly harassing a colleague. She denies the accusation, explaining that she is actually under disco administrative punishment and is now in Ray to help with Amanda's case. At the same time, Anton approaches them with an important lead that needs immediate investigation. Hannah and Daniel go to see Ebba. There's a recording showing Ebba and Amanda having a serious conversation before Amanda left the party. When asked, Ebba insists that they weren't arguing, but she doesn't remember what they talked about. However, in the recording, Ebba is seen crying. Hannah asks if there's anything Ebba wants to say, but she denies it. Since they can't get any more information, Hannah and Daniel decide to leave. At Amanda's house, Zura is cleaning the cabin as usual. She also cleans Amanda's house and expresses her condolences over Amanda's death. This shows that Zura has been working there for quite some time. Elsewhere, Myra meets with Harold. Now, Harold is starting to suspect Myra's husband, Frederick. He thinks Frederick might have killed Amanda as an act of revenge. Harold asks if Frederick is a violent person, but Myra refuses to answer. Meanwhile, Hannah and several other officers are at a restaurant, discussing Amanda's case. One of the officers reports that they have questioned the teenagers from the previous recording. The teenagers don't know who was driving the car or its license plate number, but they remember that it was a rental car. Tomorrow, the police plan to track down the rental company to gather more information. They also discuss the money found in Amanda's room. Amanda's parents didn't give her that money, so there's a chance he had been working in secret. However, Amanda was known as a good kid, so they find it unlikely that she was involved in anything illegal. The next day, Hannah gets ready for work and crosses paths with Zura, who is carrying laundry. It turns out that Zura left her phone in the cabin and took the chance to call her mother. During the call, Zura apologizes to her mother for not being able to send money. At that moment, Hannah notices something and heads back to the cabin. She sees a bruise on Zura's face. As a former member of the Domestic Violence Division, Hannah quickly recognizes the type of injury. However, Zura doesn't want to talk about it and quickly leaves. Elsewhere, Harold is skiing. Before long, Frederick follows him on a snowmobile. Frederick says that he is sorry for Amanda's death, but that's no excuse for Harold to have an affair with Myra. After that, Harold goes to the police station and tells Daniel and Hannah that he had an affair with Myra. Harold believes that Amanda's killer may have murdered her as an act of revenge. However, Daniel and Hannah decide to speak with Frederick first. Hannah and Daniel visit Frederick at his house. Hannah asks where Frederick was on the night Amanda disappeared. Frederick replies that he was out of town and has witnesses to confirm his alibi. Daniel then brings up Harold's affair with Myra, but Frederick refuses to respond. After leaving Frederick's house, they feel that killing a child just because her father had an affair is too far-fetched. It seems like Frederick isn't the culprit. Elsewhere, a teacher of Ebba and Amanda meets Ebba at the local market. The teacher, Lass, has tried to contact Ebba multiple times, but she keeps ignoring him. Lass wants to talk because he feels she is hiding something. Back at the police station, the officers have tracked the rental car used on the night of the party. It turns out that the person who rented the car was Lass. Daniel and Hannah immediately head to Lass's house. Meanwhile, Lass and Ebba are at Lass's house. They seem close, but Ebba looks distressed. Ebba tries to leave, but Lass stops her. At the same time, Hannah and Daniel arrive at Lass's house. Sensing danger, Lass suddenly restrains Ebba. Hannah and Daniel hear Ebba's screams and immediately try to break in. Lass threatens Ebba, warning her not to speak, or he will release inappropriate photos of her. But Daniel manages to get inside and corners Lass. Ebba is finally rescued, and now it's time to interrogate Lass. On the way with Hannah, Ebba starts talking. She explains that some time ago, Amanda noticed something about Lass's bracelet and became suspicious. Hannah asks why Amanda would recognize the bracelet. Ebba explains that she and Lass used to exchange messages. One day, Ebba sent him photos of herself wearing revealing clothes. Lass then used those photos to blackmail her into a relationship. When Amanda found out, she felt Lass needed to be taught a lesson. But Ebba doesn't know who killed Amanda. Instead, she feels incredibly guilty. thinking that Amanda might have died because of her. In the interrogation room, Lass gives his testimony. On the night of the party, he received a message from Eba's phone, which was actually used by Amanda. The message contained a threat against him. Lass claims he saw Amanda leaving the house while talking on the phone, but he insists he didn't do anything to her. There is no evidence linking Lass to Amanda's murder. However, he is found guilty of committing a sexual crime against Eba, who is underage. When the police search his house, they find luxury goods and an envelope with the same handwriting as the one found in Amanda's room. Lass explains that he heard rumors about Amanda selling high-end items and alcohol, which seemed to be stolen goods. Lass blackmailed Amanda, and she eventually handed over the items to him. This is how Amanda recognized the bracelet Eba was wearing. It originally belonged to Amanda before she gave it to Lass. In the end, Lass is convicted of his crimes against Eba, but he is not the prime suspect in Amanda's murder. At the same time, Hannah receives a call from the Stockholm police. She is informed that the investigation against her has been closed, and she is free to return to work. Elsewhere, Bossy rummages through his wife's desk drawer. There, he finds a stack of overdue bills. Bossy is shocked. He had no idea their debt was this severe. He is furious that his wife kept their financial troubles a secret, especially given her lavish lifestyle. Right now, their family is in a financial crisis, but instead of apologizing, his wife lashes out at him and becomes even more hostile. Meanwhile, Amanda's mother, Lena, is overwhelmed with despair. Her daughter has been murdered, and she seems to know that her husband, Harold, has been unfaithful. In her desperation, Lena swallows a handful of pills. At the same time, Hannah calls her to ask something, but Lena only responds, "I can't take this anymore." Then she hangs up, leaving Hannah deeply concerned. Elsewhere, Frederick is working at a factory. Moments later, Harold storms in and accuses Frederick of killing Amanda. Frederick denies it, but Harold refuses to believe him and threatens him with a shotgun. As Harold grows more unstable, he finally shoots Frederick in the shoulder. Not long after, Daniel and several officers arrive, but Harold, still consumed by rage, threatens to kill Frederick. Daniel quickly informs him that they have verified Frederick's alibi. Frederick was somewhere else the night Amanda disappeared. Hearing this, Harold finally surrenders and lets Frederick go. But suddenly, Frederick confesses that he is a killer. But the one he killed wasn't Amanda, it was her dog. Elsewhere, worried about Lena, Hannah goes to check on her. She finds Lena lying weak on the floor. Quickly, Hannah helps Lena vomit the pills she took. Once Lena stabilizes, a medical team examines her. At the same time, Hannah notices a cleaning service business card belonging to Gerard's company. She asks about it, and Lena explains that she hires Gerard's services and that Zura was very close to Amanda. Curious, Hannah goes to the address listed for the business owner, who turns out to be Boss's wife. At the house, Bossy says his wife isn't home. Hannah explains that she wants to investigate reports of stolen goods, which seem to be linked to the cleaning service. But since Boss's wife isn't there, Hannah says she will return tomorrow. Later, Hannah calls Daniel and tells him she suspects Zura. She thinks Zura might have stolen valuables while cleaning, then worked with Amanda to sell them. Hannah wants to visit Zura, but Daniel suggests doing it the next day. Hannah agrees, but she's lying. Instead, she tracks down Gerard's residence. Zura explains that she is from outside Sweden and was promised a good salary. She wanted to send money to her mother, but in reality, she was never paid, and her passport was confiscated. Since she wasn't paid, Zura started stealing valuables from the houses she cleaned. Amanda caught her, but didn't report her. Instead, Amanda helped sell the stolen goods. Zura planned to use the money to return to her home country. It turns out Zura was the last person Amanda called. Before heading home from the party, Gerard's employer found out what she was doing and became furious. Just then, someone arrives at Bossy. He comes in with a shotgun, proving he is guilty of something. Bossy says he just wants to talk, but he accidentally fires his weapon. Hannah fights back and manages to disarm Bossy, but Zura gets shot in the shoulder. Hannah chases after Bossy, calling the police to report she is in pursuit. Bossy, who knows this area better, turns off his car lights and hides at a corner. Hannah doesn't realize this, so she drives past him, putting Bossy behind her. However, Bossy doesn't use this chance to escape. Instead, he rams into Hannah's car from behind, sending it off a cliff. The cliff isn't too deep, so Bossy climbs down to make sure Hannah is dead. But when he checks her car, He doesn't find her because Hannah is hiding in the darkness. As the snowstorm worsens, Bossy decides not to bother looking for her. Elsewhere, Daniel receives a call from the police, informing him that Hannah requested backup to arrest Bossy. Meanwhile, Bossy can't escape because the police have already blocked the exit. Soon after, Daniel arrives at the scene, but he also can't call or find Hannah. He asks Bossy where she is, but Bossy refuses to answer. Growing more concerned, Daniel searches for Hannah and finds her crashed car. Not far from it, he finally finds Hannah injured, but still alive. Hannah is freezing, but she is able to speak. She then tells Daniel about something from her past. Back at her old station, she suspected one of her fellow officers of abusing his wife. When she investigated, that officer turned the tables on her, accusing her of harassment. This put Hannah under investigation, but eventually, the charges were dropped, proving that she was a good cop. The next day, Bossy is interrogated. He explains that Amanda came to his house to retrieve Gerard's passport, which he had taken. Bossy refused, but Amanda threatened to report him. It turns out that after marriage, Bossy's wife ruined his company's finances with her lavish lifestyle. At first, Bossy just wanted to cut down costs, but in the end, he stopped paying Zura entirely. Bossy knew what he did was wrong, so he tried to reason with Amanda. He promised to return Gerard's passport, pay her wages, and let her go back to her home country. On one condition, Amanda had to forget about it. But Amanda refused. She wouldn't let Bossy get away with it. So, feeling trapped, Bossy strangled Amanda to death. Bossy claims he never meant to kill Amanda. That's why he left her body in the cable car, so that her family could find her. And with that, Amanda's murder case is finally solved. Daniel goes to the hospital to visit Hannah. She's badly injured, but her life is not in danger. Daniel tells her that Bossy has confessed to murdering Amanda. Hannah has just survived an incident that nearly cost her life, making her reflect on many things. Daniel suggests she extend her stay with the Ray police, and Hannah agrees. A few weeks later, still in Ray, a child and his mother are walking through the snow, but their walk takes a dark turn when they discover a human head. Daniel and Hannah are assigned to investigate the case. The police have examined the crime scene and found the victim's left leg, right hand, and head. Nearby, there's a railway bridge. It seems the body was cut up by a passing train. By nightfall, only a few body parts have been recovered. A forensic examination confirms that the victim is a man, but his identity remains unknown as no identification was found. Although this railway bridge is known as a suicide spot, the forensic doctor finds bruises on the victim's neck, suggesting he was already dead before being placed on the tracks. There's also a head injury that appears to be the cause of death. Additionally, red fabric fibers are found on the victim's body. After work, Anton attends a party. He seems uncomfortable and awkward. As he's about to leave, he runs into a man named Carl. Instead of going home, Anton talks with Carl for a while. After the party, they head to Carl's house to play with swords. The next morning, Daniel is at home with his wife and child. His wife is leaving for a few days for a training session. Since she'll be away, Daniel takes time off to care for their child. At the same time, the police chief calls him, informing him that the body they found has been identified as Johan, a former ski athlete and business partner of a ski tourism company. The police chief wants Daniel and Hannah to investigate the case. He knows Daniel is on leave, but since Johan might have been murdered, he wants Daniel to handle the case. Daniel agrees, but his wife refuses to cancel her training. She tells Daniel to figure out a solution on his own. So, Daniel leaves their child with his in-laws and meets up with Hannah. They visit a woman named Marion, Johan's wife, to inform her of his death. Then, they go to a school to meet a man named Jens, Marion's ex-husband. They're there to talk to Johan's son, Leo, and break the news about his father's death. Daniel asks when Leo last saw his father. Leo explains that he last saw Johan at breakfast. After that, he and his mother went to a concert that night, and only returned the next morning after staying at a hotel. Meanwhile, Daniel is interrogating Jens. Jens explains that he and Marion divorced 12 years ago. He is Leo's biological father, but Leo still had a good relationship with Johan. Afterward, Daniel meets with Hannah. Hannah tells him that on the night Johan disappeared, she had dinner with her childhood friend who happens to be Carl. Elsewhere, a group of tourists is enjoying a skiing trip, being pulled by several dogs. The main attraction for these tourists is skiing with Johan, a former national athlete. However, of course, Johan isn't there. Instead, a man named Linus, Johan's business partner, is at the location. The police inform Linus that Johan has died. Meanwhile, Hannah and Anton plan to visit Carl, as Daniel is busy with something else. On the way, Anton mentions several reports that have come in, one of which states that someone saw a dark-colored van with a broken taillight near the railway bridge. Soon after, they arrive at a restaurant. Anton meets Carl, but they pretend not to know each other. Carl says that he and Johan had planned to have dinner together that night. However, for some reason, when Johan arrived, his nose was already bleeding. Johan wiped the blood with his clothes and then threw them away. Carl explains that he and Johan usually had dinner together every week, but that night, Johan only came to cancel their plans. Meanwhile, Anton steps outside and checks the trash bins near the restaurant. There, he finds a red piece of clothing stained with blood, which is suspected to belong to Johan. Elsewhere, Linus receives news from the congregation board that his business lease extension has been denied. Furious, he storms into the church and lashes out at the board members. A priest named Oeli tries to calm him down. With Johan's death, the board has decided not to renew the lease. They never truly trusted Linus, but since Johan was reliable, they had previously allowed them to rent the space. Back at the station, Hannah continues working late into the night. She checks the Instagram account of Linus and Johan's business and finds a photo of them together. In the photo, Linus is wearing a red piece of clothing similar to the one Anton found. Hannah then looks into the company's financial status and discovers that they are in serious trouble. They even applied for a bank loan. However, before Hannah can explain further, Daniel suddenly feels dizzy. She decides to leave so he can rest. Elsewhere, Linus is having a conversation with Jens. They seem friendly, but they're clearly hiding something from the police. Linus tells Jens that he can no longer store his alcohol there because he's worried the police will soon interrogate him. The next day, Anton is working out at the gym when he receives a message from Carl asking to meet. Anton meets Carl, but he only comes to tell him that they can't meet anymore. This is because Anton is a police officer, while Carl is a witness in a murder investigation. Besides, Anton hasn't fully opened up about his sexual orientation yet. Elsewhere, as planned, Daniel and Hannah meet Linus at his office. They check Johan's office first. On Johan's desk, Hannah finds a bracelet. While looking at the calendar, she notices that Pilgrim FGLL is written there every week. She asks Linus what Pilgrim FGLL means, but Linus claims he doesn't know. Daniel then shows Linus the red piece of clothing that Anton found. Linus explains that the clothing belongs to him, but Johan once borrowed it as a spare outfit usually kept at the office. Hannah observes Linus and asks about the injury on his lip. Linus explains that he and Johan originally planned to expand their business in Ray. However, when he found out that Johan hadn't signed the bank loan, they had a heated argument. That's why Johan showed up at Carl's place with a bloody nose. Linus also says that was the last time he saw Johan. Hannah then asks what made Johan change his mind about the bank loan. Linus isn't sure, but he suspects it had something to do with the church congregation. He also mentions that, for some reason, Johan didn't like the church priest early. Meanwhile, Carl meets with Jens. It turns out that Jens sells illegal liquor, which is why Linus didn't want Jens storing it at his place. However, Jens refuses to get rid of it, so he sells it to Carl, even though Carl doesn't really need it. At the same time, the police discover a severed left hand belonging to Johan. Johan usually always wore his wedding ring, but strangely, when his hand was found, the ring was missing. The next day, Hannah and Daniel visit Pastor Oeli's house to ask him some questions. Daniel asks about Oeli's relationship with Johan. Oeli explains that Johan's company rented land from the church. When Johan was alive, the church board approved the lease extension, but after his death, they changed their minds. At the same time, Hannah notices the words Pilgrim FJLL and asks what they mean. Oeli explains that it's a project to build a Bible study school. However, Oeli insists that Johan wasn't involved in the project. If that's the case, why was Pilgrim FJLL written in Johan's calendar every week? At that moment, Oeli's wife, Rebecca, comes downstairs from her room. She is pregnant, and Oeli looks very concerned about her condition. However, Rebecca says nothing, because Oeli quickly tells her to go back to her room and rest. While in the car, Hannah says that Oeli is lying, because she found multiple Pilgrim FJLL notes in Johan's calendar. However, Daniel thinks Oeli might not be lying, maybe he truly doesn't know. Hannah feels that something is strange about Oeli and Johan's relationship. Hannah and Daniel then head to the office to check Johan's car GPS. They discover that Johan frequently spent time in the forest on dates related to Pilgrim FJLL. Hannah suspects that Johan might have been secretly meeting Oeli there. Elsewhere, Oeli is with Rebecca in the bathroom. She is brushing her teeth, and at first, everything seems normal. But suddenly, Oeli grabs her toothbrush and shoves it deep into her mouth. He tells her that he doesn't like it when she disobeys him by coming downstairs while Hannah and Daniel were there. This shows that Oeli is an abusive and manipulative husband. The next day, Hannah goes to the location Johan frequently visited during Pilgrim FJLL. She spots ski tracks there. The following day, she returns with ski equipment to follow the tracks. The trail leads her directly to Oeli and Rebecca's house. Meanwhile, Rebecca has had enough of Oeli's abuse. She packs her things and plans to escape, but Oeli stops her. Not only that, but he also physically harms her. Soon after, Hannah returns to Oeli's house to ask about the ski tracks she found. Oeli claims they belong to Rebecca, as he doesn't ski. Hannah asks to speak with Rebecca, but Oeli refuses. As someone who works in the domestic violence division, Hannah recognizes the signs of an abusive relationship. She insists on speaking with Rebecca. Finally, Oeli doesn't resist and allows Hannah to meet Rebecca. When they are alone, Hannah notices that Rebecca is wearing the same bracelet found on Johan's desk. She realizes that Rebecca is scared. Hannah gently asks if Rebecca wants to leave the house, and Rebecca tearfully nods. Hannah immediately calls for help to take Rebecca to a safe place. Meanwhile, Oeli is not arrested but will be further interrogated by the police. Hannah takes Rebecca to a hotel for the time being. At the hotel, Rebecca receives a call from Oeli. He uses his friend's phone to reach her. He apologizes and promises to be a better husband. However, Rebecca no longer believes him. She refuses to tell him where she is. Unfortunately, the hotel receptionist accidentally mentions the hotel's name, revealing her location to Oeli. While in her hotel room, Hannah asks Rebecca if she knew Johan. Rebecca finally confesses that she and Johan had been having an affair for quite some time. Pilgrim FGLL was their secret code for meeting up. Rebecca deeply cared for Johan because she never received love from Oeli. On the night Johan disappeared, Rebecca told him she was pregnant with his child. Johan planned to run away with her, which was why he cancelled his bank loan for his company. Something even Linus never knew. Hannah asked where Oeli was when Johan was murdered, but Rebecca doesn't know. Now, Oeli becomes the prime suspect in Johan's murder. Hannah quickly takes Daniel to search for Oeli. They go to his house, but it is dark and appears abandoned. Meanwhile, Oeli has already arrived at the hotel where Rebecca is staying. He asks the receptionist for Rebecca's room number, but she refuses to give it to him. Moments later, the fire alarm goes off. Rebecca steps out of her room, but this is merely a trick by Oeli to find her. Realizing the trap, Rebecca rushes back to her room just in time. Oeli begs her to reconcile, but Rebecca is fed up with him. She tells him that the child she is carrying is not his. Upon hearing this, Oeli loses control and grabs an axe. He starts smashing the hotel room door. A while later, Hannah and Daniel return to the hotel. Hannah checks Rebecca's room and is shocked to see the broken door. But the problem is Rebecca is nowhere to be found. The entire police force is immediately mobilized to hunt down Oeli, who has likely taken Rebecca hostage. Tracking Oeli's whereabouts proves to be extremely difficult. Anton receives multiple reports, but none of them seem significant. However, there is another report about a dark van with broken taillights. The next day, Anton informs Hannah that a close friend of Oeli mentioned that Oeli used to work at a factory. The factory has been shut down and abandoned. There is a high chance that Oeli and Rebecca are there now. Meanwhile, Rebecca regains consciousness in a place where she is badly injured. She is also unable to escape from the location, which turns out to be the abandoned factory Anton mentioned. Oeli then approaches her, but Rebecca pretends to be asleep. As Oeli gets closer, Rebecca attacks him with a wooden plank she found nearby. She quickly runs away, while Oeli chases after her. Outside, a storm is raging, and Rebecca dashes into the forest. At the same time, Hannah and Daniel arrive at the scene. Oeli catches up to Rebecca and attacks her. However, Hannah spots them and orders Oeli to release Rebecca. Oeli ignores her and is about to kill Rebecca, but fortunately, Daniel arrives just in time and shoots Oeli. Oeli dies on the spot, and Rebecca is rescued. Back at his office, Daniel appears deep in thought. Even though he shot O'Ellie to save Rebecca, it doesn't change the fact that he has just taken a life. This weighs heavily on him. Daniel returns home and starts cleaning his house. Just then, his wife comes back from her training. She feels that Daniel has been neglecting their child, constantly leaving them with his in-laws. Mentally exhausted, Daniel responds harshly. Hearing this, his wife becomes furious and throws him out of the house. Daniel ends up going to the office, where he meets Hannah, who is writing her report on the O'Ellie case. Hannah apologizes, feeling that she should have been the one to shoot O'Ellie first. Both of them are in a rough emotional state, so they spend the night drinking together. Hannah reaches for Daniel's hand, and they sit in silence for a moment. However, Daniel is not the type to be unfaithful, so he decides it's best for Hannah to go home. After she leaves, Daniel sends a message to his wife, apologizing. The next day, the police confirm that O'Ellie was in a different location at the time of Johan's murder. This means O'Ellie was not Johan's killer. Elsewhere, Anton starts being more open about his relationship with Carl. However, as he is about to leave, he notices that Carl is driving a dark van with broken taillights. Back at the station, Anton speaks privately with Hannah. He tells her that Carl drives the same van that a witness reported seeing on the bridge the night Johan was murdered. Anton asks Hannah to investigate Carl, but warns her not to let Carl know that the information came from him. Despite his relationship with Carl, Anton remains a good cop. Hannah leads the police in inspecting Carl's van. Inside the vehicle, they find fabric that matches what was found on Johan's body. Naturally, Carl is immediately questioned. He explains that on the night of Johan's murder, he was at work. He also mentions that the van belongs to the restaurant, and that all restaurant staff have access to it. Hannah asks Carl to make a list of everyone who has used the van. Shortly after, Anton calls Hannah. He informs her that on the night of Johan's murder, Jens was driving the van. Right now, Anton is at Carl's restaurant, reviewing the CCTV footage. Hannah, without Daniel, goes to Marian's house, Johan's wife. She knows that Jens is there, and asks him to come with her to the police station. At that moment, Leo appears and is unhappy about Jens being taken away. However, Marian tells him to go back to his room. Hannah instructs her colleague to take Jens first, while she stays at the house a little longer. At the same time, Daniel calls Hannah and tells her that Leo and Marian's alibi doesn't hold up. They had previously claimed they attended a concert at BM, but according to a radio report, the concert was delayed and didn't start until midnight. Hannah hears Leo and Marian arguing. She then notices a photo of Johan, where red curtains can be seen in the background. However, in the same room now, those red curtains are missing. Hannah asks where they are, and Marian replies that they are being washed. Marian wants Hannah to leave immediately, but suddenly, Leo steps forward and says he can't take it anymore. He runs outside, with Marian and Hannah chasing after him toward the train tracks. Overcome with guilt, Leo finally confesses the truth. On the night of Johan's murder, Johan told Marian that Rebecca was pregnant with his child, and that he was choosing Rebecca over Marian. Enraged, Leo grabbed a shovel and struck Johan, killing him. Leo never intended to kill Johan, but what's done is done. Afterward, Marian asked Jens for help disposing of Johan's body. Jens used the restaurant van to transport Johan's body, which was wrapped in the red curtains. They then placed Johan's body on a bridge to make it look like a suicide. Back in the present, Leo hears the sound of an approaching train and attempts to throw himself onto the tracks. But fortunately, Hannah saves him just in time. With Leo's confession, Johan's murderer is finally identified. Jens and Marian will also be investigated for their involvement in the case. Even though the murder wasn't intentional, taking a life is still a crime. Looks like Hannah is starting to enjoy life in this town. So, she decides to stay and work here a little longer. And with that, this story comes to an end.